into 3D geometry using both sketched and applied features. I'll remind you what those are when we use them, guys. So no worries right now about taking notes. You'll learn how to do basic dimensions and sketch relations to make sure your sketch geometry is created robustly and correctly. And I think you guys should learn a lot. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So if you are new to SOLIDWORKS, when you first open the SOLIDWORKS program, you're going to get a little welcome screen like this, or a splash screen. If you decide that you need to cancel, you do have a cancel option here. Or if it's taking a long time, something seems to be wrong with your system, you can cancel and try over again. When it comes up, you'll get this screen, this welcome screen. This basically just gives you a lot of access in one place to the most recent documents you've used, new part options, assembly and drawing options. We won't be covering advanced options today, but in upcoming sessions we will. Different folders and different resources here, all of which you feel free to explore on your own, but none are really pertinent to our sessions. One thing that's kind of neat down here at the bottom, there is a tech tip that you can cycle through. It just gives you kind of like a tip of the day. You know, if you read it every day, you go into SOLIDWORKS, you might learn some new things. It certainly helped me out over the years. And click outside of the welcome to just kind of get rid of everything and see the SOLIDWORKS screen. We have for I Get It, we're using SOLIDWORKS 2020 right now, even though it doesn't say SOLIDWORKS 2020. So you may see something a little different for your install, but don't worry, everything's going to be mostly the same. If you need to go back into the welcome screen, you can do it from the task pane here on this welcome tab by clicking the house icon, or the same thing up here. All right, and that's pretty much the welcome screen. Let's go ahead and get into a new file. We're going to go ahead and click the new icon here. The drop-down is just going to be the same option. And here are the three main parts or document types in SOLIDWORKS. You have a part, which is made up of sketch geometry, and the sketch geometry can be used to create 3D geometry. You can also have a sketch living by itself without any 3D geometry in a part document. When you take those parts and put them together to create an assembly, that's when we move over to the assembly document. You can see the iconography a little different here. And those are called components at this point. So components of an assembly are typically lots of different parts or other sub-assemblies. You can create smaller assemblies that go into assemblies. And we'll get more into that when we do the assembly session. Last type we have is drawing. This is how you communicate your models, whether they be parts or assemblies, to outside people. So we'll go over that and learn how to do some drawings and detailings in the last of our 4 sessions. So go ahead and highlight the part option, and we're just going to click OK to go ahead and get into it. And you can see that right now I have a white background, and your SOLIDWORKS install out of the box, you're going to see a 3-point faded background. This is because I've changed my part template to start open with a plain white background. Another thing that we'll get into in the next session. So I'm not going to expand on that right now. All right, so let's go ahead and look at some of the parts of the UI here, the user interface, the main parts that we'll be interfacing with today. So this big open area right here is called the graphics area. This is where you'll be looking and viewing at all your sketch geometry and 3D geometry as you create it. This is the main interface here for SOLIDWORKS. Over on the left, we have several tabs. The only tab really going to be dealing with today is the Feature Manager Design Tree. And this is where all of the features and sketches as they're created are listed here on the left side. This is probably the second most interacted with part of the user interface. And then up here at the top, we have the Command Manager ribbon. So Command Manager consists of different tabs, all with different tools and commands that you would use for that group of functions. So what we'll be looking at today are mainly the features and sketching tabs, And maybe we'll even jump into the Evaluate tab to use this Measure tool a few times. Can't be sure about that. You may see me jump up at the top of the graphics area and use some of these icons just to make things happen real quick. When I do that, I will just explain what they're for. Some of the icons that you see here may not be what you see out of the box. So I can show you real quickly how you might be able to change that. If you right click on any Command Manager tab or existing ribbon, you can go to the Customize option. And then here you can look at commands and literally drag commands almost anywhere you'd like. So if I say wanted to have a new document up here, I could just drag that and add that there. So if we don't like it, we can just drag it out, and once you see the X, it'll get rid of it. So there's a quick idea of how you might be able to customize your UI to work best for you. There are other things we'll be using during the examples today that I'll explain as we do them as far as user interface is concerned. So I think that's a pretty quick intro into the user interface. Let's go ahead and start creating a part. And let me show you what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to hit R on my keyboard, and it's going to bring up the recent documents window. And I'm just going to click on this assembly file here. So what we're going to be creating today, the 4 things, are going to be first this guide bracket right here. And if I select that, you can see it's also selected over here in the Feature Manager. Feature Manager here looks a little bit different for assemblies than it will for parts, but we'll go over that as we get through it. Then we're going to go ahead and jump into creating this handle assembly here. And then, or we're going to create it as a part, 2 different parts, no assemblies today. And then we're going to finish off by creating this hub part right here, actually using the hole wizard to create the hole for this set screw. So that's an overview of what we're going to do. Let's go ahead. I'm going to hit Control Tab, hold down Control and hit Tab on my keyboard. And that allows me to switch over to that part that I created, that I just started a second ago. This will let you switch between all open documents. Right. Now, one of the first things you want to do when you start a new part or a new assembly is to make sure that your document or that your document units are correct. They're the units that you'd like to be working with. So my part template is set up for millimeter gram second. The quickest way to access these settings is down here in the bottom right. And I want to go ahead and change that over to inch pound second. So we'll be dealing with mostly inches in these sessions. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And we can see it down at the bottom here. It's confirmed that IPS is selected. So let's go ahead and get started with a simple sketch. Sketching is the first part of creating a solid model in SOLIDWORKS. You have to create a sketch to basically extrude or revolve or do some other type of sketch feature with to create solid 3D geometry. And to create a sketch, you have to have some existing planes to sketch on. So every SOLIDWORKS document starts off with 3 default planes. They're the front plane, top plane, and the right plane. They're hidden by default. If you want to right-click any one of them and choose the icon here at the top, the eye icon, to show or hide, that can be done no problem. Another thing, if you do that and you see that these icons here are colored instead of an outline, you can tell that they're shown, because sometimes over here, if this option, View Planes, is not toggled, you'll see, hey, it's set to show here, but I don't see it in the graphics area. So that's another little tip there. So if you guys are seeing having trouble viewing your planes, you got to make sure that this view option under the eye up here is set to view planes, and that's toggle. I'm going to go ahead and hide this plane for now, and we'll go ahead and start a sketch and using that front plane. So I could pick any one of these default planes to start a sketch on. I'm going to go ahead and choose the front plane. I'm going to click on it, left click. And the quickest way to start a sketch is to just use the context menu when I click on that plane to start a sketch. Now, there are other ways we can do this. Let's just say I go into the sketch tab here. I can select that front plane, and then also click sketch up here. Anyway, either way will get you started to do a sketch. So let's go ahead and do that. When I do that, you can see that that plane automatically rotated normal. It's called normal to the screen. So that means that the sketching plane is, or whatever plane you're viewing, is going to be basically parallel to your screen plane and looking at it straight on. This is the best way, I think, to create sketches, especially when you're first starting with sketch geometry. But note that if you do want to rotate the sketch in 3D space while you're working, that's a possibility, and I'll show you a little bit of that later. All right, so I'm going to get started by creating that bracket design we were looking at. It's called a guide bracket, and we're just going to go ahead and sketch a few rough lines to start. Now, I know that I want this, this is going to be a symmetrical part. If I can actually switch back over to my thing here, I can actually right-click on that part and choose Open Part in Position to open this part by itself in another window. So if we look at it right on, if I select this plane, for example, and choose the Normal To option, we can look at it straight on. You can see that it's symmetrical. So the left half is exactly symmetrical with the right half. So knowing that, I'm going to use a little bit what's called design intent, thinking about how I want my design to work and behave down the future, and sketch with some design intent in mind. So basically that design intent is going to be only to sketch half of this bracket right now, and we will use the mirror command to just quickly do the other half. So let's go ahead and get into it. First of all, I want to go ahead and sketch the half of my bracket design that I will be using, and I think I'm just going to do a rough outline. I'm not going to apply any dimensions or anything to it first. That's typically good practice, just to do a kind of a rough outline of whatever sketch profile you're trying to do first, and then go into the other stuff afterwards, so as far as detailing and dimensioning. So I'm going to use this center line here to define the middle plane of my part, and this is what I'm going to use to attach one of my dimensions to. All right, so basically, I'm going to do that over again real quick, just so I can tell you exactly what happens. I use Control-Z to undo there. I pick a center line, and then I click once on the origin, and you can see that it snaps to the origin there with my mouse. And then I'm going to just move my mouse over roughly, and you can see it also kind of snaps there to horizontal. And when you see that little icon that shows you a horizontal line, that lets you know that this relation will automatically be added to that line, and that will keep it horizontal. So I'm going to click again. The line command stays active when I'm done clicking. So I'm just going to double click real fast to end that line. I could also hit escape to do the same thing. And there we go, I've created the first line. Now, right now I have sketch relations turned off as far as visibility, because they can kind of get real busy when you look at a complicated sketch and make things hard to see. But I'll turn it on real quick, and you can see that I created both automatically. SOLIDWORKS created both the horizontal relation for this line and a coincident relation for the point at the end of the line. So looking at this simple line right now, you can see that everything is colored black, this little dot right here at the point, and the line itself, except for this blue point at the end. That's because that blue point is the only thing that hasn't been defined already. There's still a guess as to how long this line needs to be, as in where does this point need to reside on the line. So the last thing to do to make this sketch fully defined would be to add a dimension. We'll get into that here shortly. I'm going to keep dimensions on for a second, or relations on for a second, so you can see them as they're added. If I had not done that, I can select that, delete it, and now you can see how the rest of the line turns blue, and I can now drag it outside of horizontal. So that if I wanted to add that manually, no problem, I can select it, and then in the In Context menu, just choose Make Horizontal to make it as quick change as possible. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a circle here to the end of this dot. I'm going to go in and use the circle command. There are different circles to choose from. We're going to be using the first circle option here, and that is created by clicking once. And you can see I get the orange icon pop up. That means it's snapped, and it's going to create a coincident relation to that point as well for the center of the circle. I'm going to click once, I'm going to drag out, and then I'm going to click again to create the circle. It's that simple. I'll add some dimensions to the circle here shortly. You can see that the circle is blue, completely blue instead of black, which again says that it really has no defining dimensions to it right now, locking its size in. All right, we're moving on here. Let's go ahead and add some dimensions here to start to solidify things. Now, if I use my measure tool here from the Evaluate tab, I can click on this line to see how long it currently is. Right now, just by sketching in free space, it's created it at almost 4 inches. I wanted to show you a cool little feature here, and I'm zooming in and zooming out by using my zoom wheel on my mouse. The focus area is always going to be where your pointer is, so you can see how I'm zooming in and zooming out. Another way to zoom in and zoom out is to press the middle mouse button down while holding the shift key and moving your mouse up and down, and that gives you a little bit more of a controlled zoom. All right, so to pan, you can hold the control key and click your middle mouse button, hold that down, and then just move your mouse around, and that'll get you to pan. Okay. And to rotate, you just hold down the middle mouse button and move your mouse around. And you can see how the 2D sketch is now rotating in 3D space. And to get it flat back or normal to the screen, we'll just click the normal tool. All right, we'll go over those manipulation options again as we continue throughout the sessions. All right, so let's go ahead and add some dimensions. I like to use the Smart Dimension tool. It's probably the most capable dimension tool. It's just one dimension tool that automatically figures out what type of dimension you're trying to add based on the geometry selected. So I can select it up here by clicking it, or we can use mouse gestures to select it. And mouse gestures are used by holding down the right mouse button and moving your mouse. And when you do that, we'll cover more of this in upcoming parts of the session here. When you do that, you get a whole bunch of different options based on the environment you're in. So right now I'm sketching, so it's giving me a bunch of sketching options. And if I keep the right mouse button held down and just go over that little dimension icon, that also starts Smart Dimension for us. So that's a nice little shortcut to get in and out of that tool or several different tools very quickly. If I hit escape, you can see all the other sketch tools I had. I could start a line if I wanted to quickly, a circle if I wanted to quickly, box, we got power trim, lots of common use tools. And we'll discuss these as we move forward through these sessions. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the dimension tool, and I'm going to just click on this line to add a dimension to it and pull it up here. And now when I click again to place the dimension dialog comes up where I can actually type in its value. And we just want to make this 2 inches. And I'm going to hit enter just to go ahead and apply that. Now you can see that none of this stuff got smaller when I added that 2-inch dimension, even though it was initially dimensioned at nearly 4 inches. That's because the first dimension you add to a sketch in SolidWorks does not redefine its display in the window. So that's a nice little update that happened a few years ago. So you don't accidentally, make a huge line and then apply a dimension to it, and then it's so small you can't see it or something like that. So the next thing I'm going to mention is our circle here. So I'm just going to click on the circle, and you can see that it gives me lots of different dimension or diameter dimensioning options here. So I'm just going to come off to the side. It doesn't really matter exactly where I put it. And we're going to define this at 0.625, or I think it's 5/8. So go ahead, hit enter. All right, now I'm going to hit escape to escape my dimension command. And now you can see that all of our sketch geometry is colored in black. This means that between the horizontal relation here and the coincident dimension here, and all the other dimension or relations and all the other dimensions, that this sketch is fully defined. I can't move it, I can't drag it, I can't change its definition in any way right now. If I were to say just get rid of this one coincident relation, you can see that everything is now blue because it doesn't have the anchor point of the origin to define from. So the part origin or the origin in any document, whether it be an assembly or part, is always going to be fixed. And that's the best way to start a sketch or assembly, is from the origin. So you are starting everything from a fixed point. Again, that's part of your design intent. And I chose to have the origin directly in the center of my part. As we build it, you'll see that this origin is going to be right in the middle of a whole feature we're going to create down the road. So it pays to think about how you want your parts created before you get in there. All right, so I'm going to continue moving on, and we're going to go ahead and create another circle around this circle to help start our geometry. And I think the best way to do that is to use the offset entities command. Offset entities does almost exactly what it sounds like. You select an existing entity, and it will give you the option to offset that entity inward or outward, whether it is a line or a complete whole profile. In this case, I want it to be offset by, I think we're going to go 188 inches for this offset. And then I can click OK or hit enter, and we can see that the offset will be created. All right, now these little shaded areas of the profile indicate that a profile is completely closed and it is ready to create some type of solid geometry if need be. If I were to, this is just to show you real quick, if I were to create just this shape right here, it's not closed yet, but as soon as I close it off, you can see that it gets that shading. So that's another way to check to see whether or not you're creating valid profiles. As soon as you get this shaded inside your profile, you know it's closed and it's ready to create 3D geometry. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go into the line command to continue creating the geometry we need here. So I'll do that up here from the command manager. And I'm going to hover this origin and then move down to get inferencing. You can see that dotted line. That's basically inferencing that hovered geometry and will allow me to start this click exactly in line with that if I want to. That's called inferencing. So I'm just going to go ahead and start there, click once. We're going to create a horizontal line. All right, and click again, and then I'm going to connect it to my circle here. All right, and now as I move across the edge of my circle, you can see that little, we've got a coincident relation displaying there in yellow. So it's going to create this point coincident to this circle edge no matter what. But as I keep going, you can see that we've got a tangent one pop up there too. And that's exactly how I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and click. And now that line was created tangent to the circle. I'm going to double click to finish my line creation there. All right. So we need to go ahead and create a top portion for this as well. But since it's also symmetrical, why don't we go ahead and jump into the mirror command to do that. So I like to pre-select my entities before I do this type of command. Considering I'm not actually sketching anything with this command, I'm just recreating already sketched geometry, these two things. You can kind of see here, the mirror entities almost explains how it works. I'm going to click that. So when you click mirror entities within a sketch, you get the options, a little dialog for you to select the entities to mirror. And then you also want to select a center line, a dotted line, to mirror about. That's this guy right here. So I'll go ahead and, oops, we need to select that box first. So I can right click on that if I make a bad selection and either delete it, or I can right click and clear all selections if I'd like to. Go ahead and click in this box right now to make sure that it's selectable. And then select the center line, and you can see the preview of that geometry is now up here. Now what this also does is create a mirror relation between these two guys. So whatever I change on the bottom entities will also be mirrored on the top entities. So I'll go ahead and click OK to do that. And if I wanted to move that line, you can see the top now moves in conjunction with the bottom. So if you're sketching symmetrical parts, using the mirror tool is definitely the way to go. Now let's go ahead and add another dimension here. I want the space between these guys to be 3/4 of an inch. So we'll go 0.75. And because there is a mirror relation between these two entities, you can see that they are both now fully defined, even though I didn't dimension them from the center line. And that'll keep things working the way we want. Now let's see here. I think the next thing I want to do is define where these points are going to live. So I will just add a dimension to this line, making it 1 inch. You can see when I did that, that instead of moving this point over to match the 1 inch dimension, it moved these guys over. That's because these 2 points are not coincident, or I'm sorry, horizontally related to this point, which is how we would like them to be. So all I need to do is select one of them and then the option, the origin or that point. I can also select from the feature dropdown, for example. So if I selected that point and then I go and control select the origin, you can see now both are selected. And I have a vertical relation option for the add relations here. And I'll just click that. And now everything is defined. And the last thing we want to do is to get rid of this portion of the circle to make this all an open profile with just one open circle here. And I'm going to use the trim entities tool for that. So often building your profiles is a lot easier when you use different shapes like squares and circles and rectangles combined. You can come back with the trim entities tool and with power trim selected, which is the most effective, I think, you can just hold down the left mouse button and drag your mouse. You can see the little gray path that it gives you. Drag your mouse over entities you'd like to trim away to the nearest geometry. You can see how I did that. I'll just go backwards and do that again real quick for you guys. Trim entities, power trim. I also have that set up as a mouse gesture right now. So, and just hold down and go over the entities you want to trim. All right. So there we go. We're starting to make our part here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and exit this sketch real quick and jump back into it to finish it. But to exit a sketch, you can either exit from the confirmation corner using the arrow here, the blue arrow. That will exit a sketch and save all your changes. If I were to hit the X, that would exit the sketch and discard all of my changes. So I have to come back in here and start over again. But we're going to go ahead and exit and keep the changes. Now everything's kind of displayed in blue because we're not in the sketching environment anymore. You have to be in an active sketch edit to be in the sketching environment. Now we are in the part editing environment. So I'm going to go back into the sketch environment by right-clicking on the sketch and selecting Edit Sketch. You can see that this document, this icon is slightly different than the sketch icon because it's got the pencil here. All right, now I'm back into that. I'm going to go ahead and turn off relations for the rest of today's session because they kind of start to get in the way, but I will definitely point out anything that's pertinent. And just as before, I'm going to use the Mirror Entities command to finish this guy off. So I'm going to window select all of my geometry. And as an aside, there are two different types of window selects. You can do a green box, which is dragging from the bottom and up to the left to get anything, to select anything that crosses that box. So you can see if I just select these entities, those are all that's going to be selected. If I do a blue selection box, it's going to select only the things that are within that blue selection box completely. So the only thing in this case are those two dimensions. So green selection, I'll make sure I get everything. And then I'm going to jump into the Mirror Entities command. Whoops, I need to create one more thing before we do that. I do not have a line to mirror these entities about yet. So go back in, use the center line tool, double click to get rid of the line or to stop the command. Okay. And now I've got that. So I can select that line too. And sometimes SOLIDWORKS is smart enough to just know what selections you would like to do. And we'll see how good it is there. Nope, looks like it picked that line as part of the entities to mirror. But if I go ahead and select that line here in the pane, you can see it highlighted to make sure that I have the right one. And I'll just delete that. Select that box and go back in, select my line there. And you can see the full preview of the part. Now, once I say, okay, let's go, you can see now I have a completely closed profile and actually two smaller closed profiles with them. The last thing to do to finish out this profile is one more hole, which I'm going to sketch right here in the center, starting at the center with a circle, clicking one more time to complete the circle. I'm going to use mouse gestures again, holding down the little right mouse button, swiping up to get smart dimension. And we're going to add a dimension of 0.375 to this. All right. So now I have now I have a completely closed sketch profile, fully defined. You don't see any blue geometry left here. Everything's been defined. This sketch right here or this dimension right here was automatically inserted when I used the offset entities command. So that was created for me. I'll go ahead and exit the sketch, keeping my changes. And we can see down here go back into the sketch, sorry. That down here in the confirmation or the status bar down here at the bottom, it's called the status bar, we have fully defined. That's another check just to make sure that everything is completely defined. And the reason we want to do fully defined sketches is so your part geometry doesn't start to act weird down the road. If everything wasn't fully defined, you could come in here and accidentally move a point, or adding the part to an assembly might make a change in the sketch that we can have done. So I will go ahead and exit the sketch here. And then we're going to go ahead and jump into the Features Command Manager to extrude this guy. And Extrude Boss Base is the most basic of all the 3D geometry commands within SOLIDWORKS. So typically this is what's used to create your base command. So the base geometry is the first solid geometry you create for any part. A boss can be considered anything added to that base geometry after the fact. So I'll go ahead and select this. And it asked me to select a sketch on which I'd like to extrude. I'll go ahead and select any part of the sketch, and you can see how that changes. Now, currently, it looks like it wants to sketch everything. So it's not giving me these holes that I wanted to create in this part through this extrusion. No problem. To make that work, we have to go down to the Sketch Contours box right here, and I'll just highlight it, and now it allows me to select which of the contours I'd like to actually extrude. So if I clear the box, for example, it's going to give me the result that I was looking for. right, in the preview. And now for the thickness of this part, I think it's going to be about 1/8 inch thick. Very thick piece of metal. It's a piece of steel, so that's about all we need for this part. I can go ahead and hit Control-Tab after I exit the command to double check that. But you can see right here, it's a blind direction, which gives you just a depth to define. There are other types of extrusion options as well. We'll cover those as we create more complex geometry, but this is the most simple type. I can change the direction of the extrude by clicking this button. If I want, we're going to have it extruded towards the screen. And we won't be covering this today, but if you want to add a draft, you can do that too, which would actually create, you know, a taper on the, whoops, that's too much. If I were to create that with a draft, it would be creating a taper, which we're not going to be doing. But just so you know, if I wanted to do a second direction, say I wanted it to be a 1/4 inch away in the opposite direction from that sketch plane, I could define it like that if I wanted. Again, lots of different options with this boss extrude command. It's probably one of the most often used commands in SOLIDWORKS. So feel free to play around with it and to figure out what you can do with it. Last thing real quick, thin feature will create just an extrusion around the line geometry at the thickness you define. You can see, you can decide which side of the line geometry you'd like to create that on too, and then different options in there as well. So there's our preview for our part. I'm going to go ahead and click OK to make it. And there we have it. Pretty simple part. So if we go back and look at our woodworking vise part here, we can do a double check to make sure I got that thickness definition correct. With my measure tool active, I can just click on this line right here, or this edge. It's just an edge that's selectable for all geometry. And that'll let me know how thick that part was. And it looks like it's a little bit thicker in this case than I made it before. So let's go back and change that thickness, 0.1563. Again, Control-Tab to go back to the part. I can edit the part by right-clicking or left-clicking on it and choosing Edit Feature from the feature manager over here. Here we are. Jump back into that, and I'm just going to change that to 1.5. I think that's 1.66. Doesn't really matter. And then click OK to complete the change. All right, so there's our first part in SOLIDWORKS. I know it wasn't that complex, but you know, these are the types of things you use to build on existing geometry to make more complex stuff. Now, if you can see right here on the edge, you can see that as this curve is displayed, you know, it's just a little faceted, like it's like a little bit of straight lines creating here. I want to get that to be displayed a little bit smoother. So we're going to look into options for the first time up here. I'm going to click on options. There are two different types of category options. You've got system options on this tab, and then you've got document properties. So these document properties are going to be related specifically to any document that you are currently working in. The system options are going to be general system options that apply to any document no matter what. So for this example, I'm going to go into model display, or I'm sorry, it's image quality. And right here, I'm just going to bump up the amount of facets to make a smoother circle. And you can see as I change this, the display there changes as well. So a reason to keep this maybe low is if you have low system resources, like an older computer or something that doesn't really handle SOLIDWORKS as well as you wish it would. Changing this to lower can help things run a little bit smoother. But since I've got an okay computer here, I'm just going to keep that displayed as smooth as possible. And you can see now that that curve is displayed a little bit different. I'm going to go back and edit the sketch. So you can see if I expand my part or my feature, the sketch was absorbed by it. So that means the sketch is now underneath this feature because it's being used to define the feature. And if I highlight that in the feature manager, you can see the different arrows there. So the purple arrows mean that something is dependent on what you're highlighting. And the blue arrows mean that something is related to what you're highlighting. So right now, the blue arrows are pointing to the front plane and the origin because I have the sketch related to both I have the sketch point related to the origin and it's residing on the front plane. And the purple arrow goes to the extrude because it is dependent on this sketch to exist. Without the sketch, it would not exist. And without the sketch being defined correctly, it won't exist. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this sketch by clicking on it and choosing the edit sketch option. Another thing is it automatically hides it once it's absorbed. So if I do want to show it for any reason, I can use the show icon and you can now see the sketch there superimposed over the solid geometry. We'll go back and hide that. Do a quick edit. I wanted to show you what it looks like when you have overdefined geometry. All right, so right now everything is defined by the dimensions and relations I have. But if I try to add a dimension or relation I don't need, like this second 2-inch one, things are going to turn yellow. And it's not liking that, and it's going to ask me, hey, do you want to make this driving or this dimension driven? Driven meaning this dimension will just exist to let me know what that measurement is. It will not actually drive the geometry at all. I could do that, but in this case, I want to leave the dimension driving just to show you what an error looks like. So I'm going to click OK. And now we have an overdefined error. And this can happen sometimes, especially when you go back and modify sketches that exist. I think the best way to deal with these overdefined errors when you get yellow sketch geometry is just to use the tool built into SOLIDWORKS to help you figure it out. I mean, in this case, I can see that deleting this dimension will give me the correct result, but if it's more complex, it could be hard to see. So if you just double click the overdefined message down here in the bottom, it'll bring up the sketch expert, and the sketch expert helps you diagnose these types of problems. And I'm going to go ahead and diagnose that, and then it'll show you a list of possible solutions. So right now it says, hey, I think the solution 1 out of the 5 solutions it found was to just get rid of this. Just get rid of this distance thing you have in there. You don't need that. But I could go through and it'll give me, maybe I could get rid of that distance dimension, which will also make it valid. Or I could get rid of these 3 relations. So you can jump through these, decide which one you like, you want to apply, and just hit the accept button. And when I do that and hit OK, it'll automatically get rid of the superfluous data for you. And now I have a valid sketch again that's fully defined. I'll exit that. You can see that my part is still looking good. Now, let's actually do that one more time just to show you what it looks like if you exit the sketch with invalid geometry. You can see that I have a plus over here. That plus indicates that that sketch is overdefined. Right? Now, it's not creating any problems for the geometry to exist at this point. It just lets you know that there's more data in here that you need. So another thing to look for when you're creating your sketches. All right. So I think that's the first of the 4 parts we're going to be creating today. See where we are in time. We're getting pretty low. I will go into this next part and create it as quickly as possible. All right. So I'm going to go File, New Part, double click it to start a new one. I'm going to start on the front plane again. And just as a reminder, in the chat for this meeting, we do have all the part files for the woodworking vise assembly. Then you guys can download that and interrogate them yourselves if you want to try to recreate this on your own time. They are for 2019 and above, I believe. So you'll need a SOLIDWORKS seat of 2019 or newer to use those files. And if you wanted to view them with, I think, e-files or something like that, you can view them on the web. So I'll go ahead and get started for this on my new handle part. That's the next part we're going to be making. Let me go ahead and jump out of there. Just show you real quick what we'll be making. Make this part real quick. All right, so jump. Remember, Control Tab goes through open parts. So I'm back to the part that I just started. I'm going to start on the top plane this time with a sketch, and I'm going to sketch just a simple circle. I'm going to give that a diameter of 0.625. All right. So I also want this to be centered, the origin of my part to be centered within the handle. So when I go into the features to create this extrude, you can see that I don't even have to exit the sketch. I can just go right into the extrude command, and SOLIDWORKS knows what I want to do. Okay. In this case, I want to make the handle 9 inches long, but since I want the origin to be in the center of the handle, I'm going to change that from blind to mid-plane. So that means now it's going to go 9 inches out mid-plane. So 4.5 inches in one direction, 4.5 inches in the other direction. This is exactly what I want. I'm going to go ahead, OK. All right, and now we have a simple rod. No biggie there. I do want to create a ball end, though, on one of these ends. So I think I'll go ahead and create that on the bottom. If I highlight my planes over here, you can see my front plane automatically sized to include my whole rod size there. So I'm going to back and look at that normally. I can stretch this bigger if I'd like, just for making things more clearly. It's no problem. And I'm going to use that front plane to make my next sketch on. Okay. You can see how that's right in the middle of that rod. I'm going to come down here, start with a circle, and I'm going to snap it to the midpoint of that edge. And it automatically does it, you can see. I'm going to drag my circle out. And then I'm going to give that a diameter measurement. And I think we want this to be about 1.25 inches in diameter. Oh, 1.25. Okay. And there we go. Now, as you saw before with the sketch entity commands, or the trim entity commands, I'm going to do the same thing here shortly. So I've got my line command active, and I'm just going to snap it coincident with both the circle edge and the profile of the end of this rod. And now this only works right now because I'm looking at the sketch normally. It allows me to select that geometry. Okay? I'm going to come in and get rid of that guy right there. And actually, I sketched a little bit more than I needed to. Sketch one more line from here to here. And I'm going to trim away everything except for just this 1/4 right here. All right, now I have a viable profile. You can tell because it's completely shaded. Now I want to rotate this profile around to make that ball shape. So I'm just going to go ahead and change by holding down my middle mouse button and using the mouse. I'm going to change my view there a little bit just so I can see this preview. And I'm going to go right into Features and choose the Revolved Boss Base option. Ask for an axis of revolution. In this case, I'm going to pick this solid line. It does not need to be a center line. And once I do, you can see that it previews that revolve around that part. So everything looks pretty good there. But I do want this here. I'm going to go ahead and just hit the OK, so you can see what that looks like. And we've created a rod with a ball end at one side. Now, pay attention to your solid bodies folder up here in the feature tree. This will let you know how many different bodies you have in a single part. And solid bodies are created when bosses or solid features do not touch each other, or if when you're creating a feature that does merge with other features, does touch other solid geometry, you can choose to uncheck the merge result option. With that unchecked, now it's going to create this as a separate body. And you can see when I highlight them, they preview as such, separate bodies. And now I typically like to model as close to real world geometry as possible. So in the real world, you would make this wooden shaft first and then glue a little ball in the end. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and keep these two bodies separate. And you can see in the solid bodies folder that they're both selectable. This is a little bit like an assembly, but they don't behave the same. They're not as easy to modify or move around, but it can be done. So just a little tip there for bodies. All right. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a separate part that's just this ball by itself. Okay? And this can be done really easily by going in. And sorry, I don't need to edit the feature. I want to edit the sketch. I'm going to edit the sketch here. Just going to go ahead and select all of the sketch entities. You can see they're all sketched or selected. And I'm simply just going to do Control-C on my keyboard to copy those guys. Now, exit my sketch. I can do either the X or the arrow. And we'll go start one more new part, double-clicking. I'm going to go ahead and start this sketch on the front plane. And then simply press Control-V to paste those entities. And you can see that when I did, not all the geometry comes through. Okay? So you can see in this case, only this this measurement came through. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we're going to add a few more dimensions, or at least one dimension there to keep that radius defined. I can window select all these and drag to, oops, looks like that didn't behave as I'd like. Here's what you guys need to do when you're copying sketches from one sketch to another. You guys need to make it a block. That'll help out the best, because then you can move everything as one single entity. So if I select all these and then go up here and choose this make block option that pops up after you make a selection in the context menu, what that does is just basically make all those entities one solid thing. So now they will all move independent of one another. So now I can move the whole thing without any of the geometry changing. And snap this point. Actually, let's snap this point to my origin. So now I have sketch geometry starting with an origin. I can go ahead and right click on this guy and choose the explode block option down here to undo what I did now that I moved the geometry. And now it's all blue again, and I can come in here and add the rest of the rest of the things I need to make sure that it is completely defined. All right. Sometimes it helps to just drag on geometry to kind of see what's defined and what isn't. So I can see, hey, I need to define one of those guys right there. If I drag it out of the way it was, all I have to do is hit Control-Z to get it back to where I know it's supposed to be. And then I'll just add dimensions. Oops, I don't need that one again. To continue defining things. Looks like that relation wasn't created automatically. We'll do that, make coincident, and there we go. All right. Now, just as before, I'll highlight everything, do a revolve base. Didn't figure it out for me then. And I'll click OK to complete the part. All right. So now I have this part sitting by itself to use in my assembly down the road to attach to the end of our handle. All right. So it looks like that's everything we're going to be able to cover today. I was hoping we'd be able to get into the hub part, but I will cover that part at the beginning of our next advanced modeling session, so you guys won't miss out on anything. As you can see, we'll go real quick over simple saving options here. You can save an existing part after it's been saved, or save as for the first time, just like almost any other Windows functionality. There's not a whole lot to that. So I'll call this ball and save. And then we have it. You can see it changed up here in our feature manager. So as a summation, we've created one ball in today. We've also created a handle with an attached ball at the other end. And we've created a guide bracket. So when we come back in next for our next session, we're going to learn some more advanced stuff, including this hub. And we're going to start modeling these guys. So you're going to learn a lot of stuff there. Well, I think that's going to cover it for today. I would suggest the homework for everybody who plans on attending all these sessions would be to go home and make the parts that I just made on your own. If you need a little bit of reference, you can download the woodworking vise assembly that's in the chat for this meeting, and you can use those parts as references to get your work done right. I wouldn't worry about specific dimensions when you're creating these yourself. It's all kind of just for you learning, so just kind of play around, have fun with it, and see how far you can get. And we will join you for the next session to get into some more advanced topics. So hopefully you guys learned a lot today, and if this was your first time getting into SOLIDWORKS, hopefully you found it valuable for you.